Welcome to Capitol Preview, a weekly bipartisan discussion with Iowa legislators about the key issues facing our state. Brought to you by Mediacom.
Hi, welcome to another episode of Capitol Preview. My name is Bill Peart. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Iowa Cable and Telecommunications Association, brought to you this morning by Mediacom. This is a show that we explore issues that are important to Iowans. At the Iowa State House, we have both representatives and senators as our guests. Our guest today is Representative Bobby Kaufmann, District 73, Republican from Cedar, Muscatine, and Johnson. Mr. Kaufmann, good to see you this morning.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for coming in. I appreciate
Wouldn't
that.
miss it.
I'm just going to jump in. It's a kind of a conversational show, and so I just want to kind of see what's on Bobby Kaufmann's mind. EMS funding has been a hot topic. What is the legislature doing about the EMS funding?
Yeah, that has been a very hot topic, and we passed a bill out of the Iowa House that I'm hoping to get off the floor of the Iowa Senate that will have a significant financial impact on our EMS world. So right now, when an ambulance transports a Medicaid patient, they're getting reimbursed at a very small rate, sometimes as low as 15 to 20%. So you've got ambulance services with already stretched budgets making $500 trips and sometimes only receiving $100 or less back in reimbursement. The bill that we passed unanimously off the House floor would equalize that at the federal level. There's been some federal funds made available for states that apply, and so we have formally applied as an Iowa House, and if that bill passes and gets signed into law, you're looking at millions and millions of dollars to our EMS folks.
What is the Oversight Committee doing these days? Yeah,
that's a good question. My committee, I'm the chair of the Oversight Committee, and we remain very active. The big thing we're working on right now that you've probably seen a lot in the news is investigating the ICN, where the executive director had mismanaged over $380,000 of state funds, including a remarkably brazen act of having 2 semi-trailers full of media equipment paid for by the taxpayers delivered to his residence, where he then proceeded to have some of the items put on eBay. So our committee is exploring how to not only hold people that are accountable, but also what to do to make sure that the next state agency that might have that intent cannot get away with it.
So where are you at, Representative? I know I sat in on the first one, which was very interesting.
Yeah.
There's some mad legislators down there.
Yes, there is.
I'm just curious of where we go from here, or where you go from here.
We've had 3 meetings with the auditor, the current acting executive director, as well as the chairman of the board. And one of the biggest things we heard is that the employees that wanted to rat the guy out were essentially threatened with firings because they didn't have anywhere to go that were safe. And so the auditor has requested whistleblower protection so that she could protect identities of state employees that feel like there might be nefarious conduct. And so we have that bill in oversight. I'm actually floor managing it. We're going to be passing it out of committee next week, which will grant that whistleblower protection to say, hey, if you think your boss is stealing money, you can go to the auditor and not risk, being outed or risk being fired.
Are you surprised that there wasn't a whistleblower mechanism in that hierarchy before this?
Yeah, I was surprised. However, too many times in government, you don't find out about these little niche flaws until somebody exploits them.
Oh, that's probably true too. It's such a big organization. Yeah. You know now, or by this point, because they each have presented their side of competing tax plans. Where are you on the tax plans, and where do you think they're going to go?
Well, the first thing I tell my constituents is that doing nothing this year on taxes is not an option. Because of the federal changes, because Iowa's a federal deductibility state, doing nothing will mean that Iowans have a $130 million income tax increase because the federal rates are so much lower than they were pre-tax plan. So doing nothing will result on a massive tax increase in the middle class. So I try to highlight that to people. I've also heard a lot from the public that the public wants us to examine a lot of the tax giveaways and a lot of the tax credits. So my focus as a Ways and Means member on the House side will be making sure there is not an increase in middle class income taxes by inaction, but also making sure that we thoroughly examine a lot of those tax credits and a lot of the tax giveaways, because there's about $400 to $500 million of state funds that are on autopilot, and I think they deserve a thorough examination.
That's a good point. So I know I'm kind of throwing this one out of left field, but it's funnel week this week.
Yep.
So which are the big ones do you think are going to make it? the big bills that are going to make it through funnel?
Yeah, there's a lot of
in your opinion.
There's a lot of controversial issues that are yet to be brought up. There's the Farm Bureau's alternative health care option. There's a sanctuary cities bill that the Senate passed. There's a bill on traffic cameras, who I happen to be the floor manager of. And so a lot of those, actually those three issues, I think are going to be three of the biggest ones that are going to be discussed this week. Sanctuary cities, traffic cameras, there's some pretty passionate people on both sides of those issues. So this is go time, this is go week.
Yeah. What about the, and just out of curiosity, because you had the oversight on the ICN, what's going to happen with the ICN this week, do you think?
I believe that selling it is something that is premature. I've heard from the National Guard that they choose to use the ICN for their closed network. There's 3,200 miles of fiber optic cable in this state, some of it which goes over the under the interstate to all of our schools. So I don't think that's an asset the state should just do away with. I think making sure that all of the options are explored via maybe an audit, that's what the Senate bill did, as well as an appraisal to see what is the actual value. This is a state asset. Whether people want to get rid of it or keep it or do nothing with it, I think it's a very reasonable action to say that we should find out how much it's worth.
Yeah, very good. Mental health is a hot topic and continues to be the hot topic.
Yeah.
What's the legislature doing on that? Or
that's one of the first things I hear about when I go home. And we actually passed a bill unanimously 2 weeks ago, which will set up regional mental health facilities. You know, one of the biggest concerns people have right now is there's not a place to go. There's this cycle of people going to prison, people getting out of prison, people getting medicated, people going to jail, people going to the hospitals, and never people ever get help. The intent of these mental health regional centers is equivalent to like an AA, where if someone needs, a judge would have the option to commit them to a 30 or a 60 or 120-day stay at this mental health center to get themselves right, rather than just putting them in jail where they continue to go in that never-ending cycle. I think that bill is important, but also I think it's incumbent upon us as a legislature to fund it. So the REC came out last week. We now know how many dollars we have to work with. I think that we should step up and dedicate some actual dollars to make sure these centers are funded properly.
And do you, and I have heard too, and I don't know if you agree with that or not too, is that by closing these mental health facilities, you're dumping people into the mainstream, like sheriff's office and stuff, that people that have to deal with them, you know, in the end. So
I think there was a case to be made why a few of the facilities that were closed could have been an option for closing. However, I think the mistake was not having a backup option.
Yeah.
Because there is an argument to be made the facilities were old, outdated, and were going to cost a lot of money to upkeep. But I would have liked to have seen these centers set up before those were closed.
Yeah. The legislature has acted on eminent domain in the past. Is there any push for eminent domain this year?
Yeah, it's a good question, because we've had a bill every single year, and there's been people and companies and entities that have attempted to abuse our eminent domain laws nearly every session. Last year, we actually stopped the attempted biggest condemnation in the history of the state of Iowa, when the Rock Island Clean Line wanted to condemn over 8,400 acres of Iowa farmland simply for their personal profit. We were able to stop that last year. And the reason I like the question so much is because I think we've driven the point home. To date, right now, I do not see any people or individuals or entities that are attempting that mass condemnation. So I'm hoping that last year, when we just absolutely signed that into law, the governor signed it, the legislature passed it unanimously, I'm hoping the message is sent once and for all that you cannot come into this state and attempt to condemn private property without a true public purpose.
So what does that do? And it might be a dumb question. So what does that do with cities that deal with that? But they're doing it for the right reasons, right?
You know, a lot of these cities use it as a last resort. They use it when there's no other options. They use it when they have to build a school or a road, and I support that. That's what the eminent domain is for.
Right.
What I didn't support was people attempting to skirt those and do it for personal profit, do it for recreational situations.
Yeah. Well, good for you. Managed care has been a source of concern. Are there any bills to address that this year?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. Last year was really partisan, but this year we've had so many big bills. We talked about the mental health bill was unanimous. There was an opioid bill that was unanimous, and we had a DHS managed care reform bill that passed last week that was unanimous. A lot of people have had concerns with the MCOs not paying their bills. A lot of people have had concerns with the appeals process, that the MCO turns down a claim. There's kind of no one else to go to. And those are two of the biggest things that bill did, is it required in their contract them to pay their bills on time, as well as give an appeals process for people that feel like they've been wronged. I think those are two very big, important pieces, and it passed unanimously. Every Democrat and every Republican voted for it.
Last year, the legislature investigated DHS. What changes have come about as a result of the legislature? When
we first began investigating DHS, they were in the interim where Chuck Palmer was no longer the director and Jerry Foxhoven had not been named director. And I've got to say that I have been working with them these last 6 months, and I couldn't possibly have nicer things to say about Director Foxhoven. I think he's doing a tremendous job. I think he cares. He's incredibly smart, and he actually took two of our biggest recommendations right out the gate. One of the big situations we had with those two little girls that were tragically killed in West Des Moines was that their parents were receiving a taxpayer check for taking care of those little girls. Just like we talked about with the ICN, you asked if I was surprised about there being a lack of whistleblower protection status with the auditor. I was surprised to find out that if you receive a check to take care of a child, you don't have to check in and make sure they're getting basic health care. The parents of that little girl were in Disneyland when she died. And so we have now, the director has recommended that we make it law that if you're receiving a taxpayer check to take care of a child, you have to prove you're giving them basic health care, taking them to a doctor who's a mandatory reporter, taking them to health care specialists, to eye doctors, to dentists. And I think that possibly could save the next little boy or girl of whom their parents might have ill intent. And so I think that was a significant change that DHS has made that I think is going to be very important.
That's good. And that's so sad.
It is sad.
That parents would be down in Disneyland when this is going on in their roof.
99% of adoptive parents are the best people in the whole world.
Sure.
Unfortunately, the system was set up so that if someone did want to act with hate in their heart and wanted to ignore their special needs child, they were allowed to. Now that's no longer going to be the case. And if you decide not to take your kid to the doctor, a red flag is going to be brought up and you will be investigated.
Yeah. Good for you. Good for the legislature.
Yeah.
What else is going on down there that's a hot issue that maybe we haven't covered this morning?
One bill that is
popping up.
Sure. One bill that's very important to me that I'm hoping to get off the House floor this week. The House has passed it unanimously. It's not talked about a lot, but it's got to do with genetic counseling. So I represent the University of Iowa, and they've got a genetic counseling program. And these individuals in the healthcare field are extremely well versed, and they're able to map your genetics based on not only your genetics but also your history and give you a preview of what you might be able to experience later on in your life when it comes to illnesses. And I know people talk about, oh, my grandma had this, my mom had this. This actually puts science to work and says, here's what you're going to be genetically predisposed to possibly have happen to you. Here's how you can work on combating that early on. Here's how you can work on preventing that. That bill is incredibly important to me because I think it's a very proactive healthcare bill. It passed the Senate unanimously, and I'm hoping to get that off the House floor this week.
This is going to be a busy week, funnel week. This is the last week, right? The bills that are going to stay alive can pass through the committee. And
every bill that has not passed a House and a Senate committee and at least one floor is dead. Now, with exception to appropriations, which will have budgets the rest of the year, Ways and Means, which the tax bill will be something for the rest of the year, and oddly enough, my oversight committee is funnel proof. And so like that so that way we're available if something else happens, we can pass legislation.
Very good. Okay, well, I appreciate you very much coming in this morning.
Thanks for having me.
It was a great conversation.
Absolutely.
And thanks again to Representative Bobby Kaufmann, District 73, Republican from Cedar, Muscatine, and Johnson. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us here on Capitol Preview.